Okay, welcome to a brand new special episode of Seward Soundwords. Thank you for listening on YouTube on our @Sacktown channel. We're live there, and we're also live on our local radio station, 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. It is the Seward Poetry Festival. We are celebrating, and we're kicking it off here with the featured poet. I'm very happy to have Sandra Wassilie here to celebrate Poetry Month.
Well,
How are you doing?
I'm happy to be here. I
Yeah.
really am. I did some traveling to get here, and I'm safe and sound and seeing old friends, and that's wonderful.
Nice. So a good start here. There's a lot lined up with the Poetry Festival. We got coffee cup poems going on at Resart right now. So when you buy a cup of coffee there, you're going to have a poem from a local poet on there. So kind of a fun treat added to a fun treat. Of course, we got the show going right now. Sandra's going to be reading from a variety of works, but including The Dream That Is Childhood, her poetry collection that was published with Cirque Press. And really looking forward to hearing her read. It's always a treat, speaking of. And then tomorrow there is a meet and greet with writers who are here for the festival, and Sandra will be there as well at Primrose Provisions. That is in the afternoon. Did not write. And then we have Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Poses and Prose with Debbie Jean at Seward Yoga. So kind of a really creative words and yoga going on there. And then on Saturday, maybe, I guess we would call it the big day. The main event is a reading at the community library at 2:00. There will be a student showcase, Seward Elementary School students reading their work there, and many local poets, as well as the featured poet of this first annual Seward Poetry Festival. Sandra Wassilie will be there reading. It's also the day that Dreamland Books and Yarn opens right downtown. So that just happened to fall perfectly. Very excited about that. And then finally on Sunday at 10 a.m., there is one more event, Rise and Write, over at Miller's Landing with Shauna Pataki. Shauna Pataki has put together this poetry festival for Seward and for Alaska. She's done a lot of wonderful work. I know she loves doing the work, but it is a lot of work to put this all together, and really excited to get it started here on the radio. So Sandra, I'll do a quick introduction. We met at Sandy Cleven's house a while
That's
back
right,
before our publications, had a great conversation, fun Cirque event. Sandy Cleven of Cirque Journal, Cirque Press. And then we shared our books with Cirque Press, came out like in the same month, November 2020. And we had a Zoom. Things were Zoom then. And
That's right.
We shared our launch together, which was a lot of fun. Of course, you have a long-time Sewardite here. You lived here 28 years.
That's right.
And so we had that Seward connection. And that was a lot of fun. And so I'm just excited to be back with you here in Seward, the home for you in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And to hear you read. And I got into this book last night, and it is wonderful. It is a memoir in verse, so poems, but there's a real story here. It is just very touching, very cohesive and consistent. And it's a joy to each piece on its own, each poem on its own can really hit you, but then it's building a story. You're getting this whole picture as you keep reading the poem. So I nearly read the whole thing last night in one go, and it was wonderful. So thanks for being here, Sandra.
Hey, well, I thought I would read about poems, beginning with a poem about arriving in Alaska. And it was precipitated by a rare event in the San Francisco Bay Area where I live right now. We had a black ice warning.
Oh, wow.
And this was April 16th in 2018, which happened to be the anniversary of the day that I arrived in Alaska. An anniversary of arrival. This morning, flecked with wind-scudded clouds and water-stained streets, the spring deluges, a black ice in the Berkeley Hills, recalls the story of my arrival in the far north. This same day in 1947, we left the Bay Area for spring breakup in Alaska. Winter snow thawing and river ice damming flooded the local airport in Fairbanks. So we landed at the Air Force Base, but I didn't know that then, unaware that my first 5 months, a passage of 150 degrees in a year, an astrological aspect signifying events not articulated, was celebrated with displacement and changing plans. I winged north on a DC-3 with a mother to a father in an aspect neither understood very well. A coming together during a time of events not well articulated post-World War. As my mother measured fact by feeling, the skies cleared. The floods subsided, exposing stark, mud-covered land. Not the Paris of the North my father touted. She never failed to recount. She intended to return to the Bay Area, except my father was too stubborn. The story has morphed. My rendition respects weather, its capricious moods. Today, I wonder how the roads were that April 70 years ago in the Berkeley Hills before we lifted off. And then, in kind of a continuation of the California-Alaska Connect, which Shauna Pataki and I both share.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch a little toward fishing.
Nice.
And this is actually called a lone fishing vessel. And it's in memory. This is the epigraph. It's in memory of Alaska Packers Association, Alaska Basin, Alameda, San Francisco Bay, Election Day, November 8th, 2016. My meditation there doesn't really have anything too much to do with the event that day, but there is some maybe premonitions. A lone fishing vessel. There, anchored at dusk, across the channel from the empty pier upon which I stand contemplating Alaska, the place I abandoned, away from the marina, its lights twinkling from boats sardined in slips and onshore clubs frequented by bayfarers. There, quarantined in the squared-off basin against the opposite pier, almost empty but for a few stacks of rusty cargo containers. There, 3 boats, each one in its halo of water, outcast in some fashion, made distant from one another by the gathering dark, by what inhabits each, by hours that pass, solo acts within sight of the other in the harbored water, each bespeaking its way with the luminescent water. The cruiser, once sleek, blue-streaked, the sailboat, skeletal, its mast bereft, but more commanding than either, the signer, floats, plain and squat, painted white with black trim. Stripped of its hoist, no evidence of nets or fish. No name letters either side, but from the bow, a black flag flies. An anonymous survivor of raging seas come back to mourn. A faint echo of a fishing fleet that once reigned here, bringing the red gold of Alaska, canned and packed, ready to sell, and ships to winter over amid the low-lying hills of California, swaddled in low-lying clouds, streaked by sunset. Before the fleet revamped itself from sails to steam, before operations shifted north to shores dominated by snowy peaks, close to where I grew and aged, before the basin gave way to the building of ships for war and other irreversible events that empty a place.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. The California-Alaska connection has been made. You set the stage. I like it. Yeah. That's
Well,
good stuff.
okay. Well, I thought I would start shifting into this book, but first I wanted to read A Prayer for Salmon.
Okay. Yeah.
Red
gold.
Red gold.
That's a nice line.
And this shifts back to more the personal use, subsistence type of fishing.
Okay.
And this particular poem was read in Iowa. I've never been to Iowa, but my poem has been.
All right.
Actually, a couple of poems.
Nice.
That my son read at the National Family Farmers Coalition, which interestingly includes not only family farms, but fishers and ranchers that are on a family scale.
Okay.
And he was there because he's a promoter along with his brother Carl, who graduated from Seward High School. They are promoters of food sovereignty.
Cool. What a neat kind of journey for the poem. That's
Yeah.
good. I mean, the poem, it has its life. I mean, that's such a nice thing in readings when someone shares a voice that's not there, in their words. It really adds a lot. And to find, this seems like that fit perfectly.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Prayer for salmon. The river boils up, a spattering of chum into our hands, late in the fall. We cut through slippery armor, gut and behead fish, gestures honed by harsh sentries living on tundra. Steady is Auntie's arthritic grip. The curved edge of her knife slips into moist muscle, fits flush against a hard interior, splits flesh from backbone, slashes each half into waves that lift up from scaly skin and ripple downward from the tail. And we drape each spineless fish over racks to dry in the chill wind, hands pointed toward not heaven, but earth. Pray her rivers will flow with clear water and the salmon return. My hand, unschooled by a belly that has suffered the starvation season, leaves flesh on the spindly skeletons. Auntie, in silence, takes and tosses them into the soup with the heads. Tasty, but so much less left for winter, her blade on our necks.
Nice. That's a good one. As we move into, the dream that is childhood, your story on growing up on Lake Minchumina.
Yes.
I think of trapping and just kind of the action there of like the cleaning fish. There's a lot of work and even violence, or I don't know if that's the right word, but
Yeah.
kind of those verbs you're using there.
And that's why it's so important to respect those animals that we take and use them for food. I think that's the way we respect.
Yeah.
That's what growing up with indigenous people taught me, is to, if you take the life of an animal, do so with respect and make sure to use what that animal has given you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that comes through here in the book with the trapping stories that were so poignant. It means a lot to the trapper, what's going on here. It's very heavy. Yeah.
It is heavy.
Yeah.
I thought I would bring in a little more of the fishing life at the personal level that we experienced at Lake Minchumina. And fishing was important to the trapping life because then we depended so much on dog teams for transportation in
Right.
winter. So we needed to feed them and we had to fish. And this one I like because it features my mother, maybe more so than some of my other work does.
Well, this book has a lot of your parents, and that was really kind of I like how you started, this afternoon with a poem of your parents. We get their characters because the dream in his childhood. I mean, I really enjoyed learning about them. They're both strong characters, and
yes, they were very strong.
There's
characters.
one poem I want to bring up as we go. If you don't get it, and I'll remember to. I'll make a note. Go ahead.
Okay, this is Net's his narrative, and it begins the section called The Shimmer of Water, and it's very early in the book. Net's his narrative. Both parents with ready gill nets sat underneath the face of the lake in summer, slipped through its shell, chopped out in winter to catch fish the dogs ate day by day. It was my mother I watched as she stitched new nets from rolls of mesh and skeins of twine. She would throw the shuttle, a harpoon that sailed over the float line, catch the shaft to draw it through mesh while the tongue strung out, twine square by square to bind corks in place, the part of narrative that shimmers in light and holds the heaviness of a full net. She would fashion the sink line in the same way, fly the shuttle over lead weights that pulled the curtain of mesh downward, unfurled in dark water, details of structure out of sight. It was my mother I heard become mute when she repaired holes that visited the nets, torn by all manner of struggle. Pike slashing with innumerable teeth, a loon diving for the easy catch, whitefish whipping trapped bodies, seizures that strained, cotton fibers rotting in perpetual submersion. It was cotton back then. Back and forth, her hand steady as a metronome. She wove new mesh as she dove through failures, square by square. A frown would ripple her face. The shuttle began to slash. The tongue broke off when she snapped it back across the gaping tear before the twine had unwound. The rhythm suspended. She yelled at me to get another. One day, they were all used up. We waited while my father whittled a new one. The shuttle returned to her hand. She calmed back into her task. Her mood guiding restoration of net, the mending of memory.
Another great final line. Good last lines. Good stuff, Sandra. So you got all that great just fishing gear language, and you have access to that. So it's nice.
Yeah.
Those are great words, to like hear about the details of the nets.
Go find the shuttle.
Yeah.
We had them everywhere, we thought.
Yeah.
Okay. But like I say, at Lake Minchimina, we seldom got salmon that far up the river system, which the lake actually drains into the Yukon River, although I think it's geographically closer to the Kuskokwim. But we did have the pike, and we did have the whitefish. The whitefish was the best for the dog food.
Yeah, they like that.
Yeah.
So we talked about before we came on air about the introduction to this book. Do you want to give a little background on your family setup there, like your dad, or do you just want to kind of let the poems tell? I think because that helped me kind of take in the poems as we get into this book.
Yes. Well, we arrived in Fairbanks, as the first poem indicates, and then after 2 years we were at Lake Minchimina. My dad was an air traffic controller, which at that time was very important for what was then this CAA, Civil Aeronautics Administration, to have, because Alaska was dotted with field stations with air traffic controllers to direct the developing air traffic that was very important, and also very important in defense of our country.
Okay. Yeah.
Just after World War II. As the communications technology developed with more powerful signals and towers, then we needed fewer stations.
Right.
And then also the aircraft itself developed and could fly longer distances. Right. But that was what brought the family out, and we went right into the fishing and trapping lifestyle, because there were people that lived at the lake who were totally into that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were young.
I was just 2 years old.
Right. These are your memories. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where I first became aware, as the Yupik say.
Yeah. Okay. And it was till you were 10 years or so, or?
I was almost 11 when we moved to Anchorage. And
so really that was these key formative.
Yes,
memories and years. Yeah.
I was homeschooled through Calvert courses.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. So the introduction also, I tried to document also the people that I knew that lived there then, just so they have that documentation in history.
Yeah.
I just felt that was important.
I thought that was really nice. Reading it yesterday, I read every name. I don't know these, but just to know what names are like.
And they all contributed to my coming into being in some way.
Yeah. How Sandra has it here is, I note for the record the constellation of people that I remember with fondness. And then there's quite a long list of people. Mm-hmm. Good names back then.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I think that would help listeners as we kind of get into
that was it.
This world. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and to also give context, I'll read actually 2 more poems here. Regarding the trapping aspect.
Yeah, those are good.
This one, when we wore fur.
Right.
The carcasses thawed in our bathtub, blood and ice melting down the drain. Mostly marten, sometimes mink, ermine, or fox, and once a wolverine. Took up most of the bathtub. We did not bathe much in the dry cold of the gray dark season when Dad came back with his catch. Thawing required for the sacrament. Strip each creature of its pelt, turn it inside out, and stretch it onto the drawing board. One more stake in the graveyard, rooted in the living room. Another skin scraped smooth, turning brown and stiff as a frozen lake presents a snow-primed surface that tracks all who travel there, a shifting map of the trapper and the trapped sinking each spring. No longer knowable as a veteran of war returns to be swallowed by ordinary life. My father, hybrid of sky watcher for the government and harvester of furs for the money they fetched, bought a trap line, fed a dog team, and evaporated for days into ice crystal air of minus degrees. Yet like the sun, he returned, pulled by dogs, faint glow on the horizon before the reddening as a flow of blood extracts a measure.
Nice. That was We Wore Fur. Really nice title. Sandra Wassilie is here at the station, 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. We are celebrating National Poetry Month with a first annual Seward Poetry Festival. Sandra's here from California. Still has a lot of family up here in Alaska.
That's true.
Yeah, so kind of to your trip, and we're really happy to have you here in Seward. We got a lot going on this weekend, including our big reading at the library on Saturday at 2:00. Sandra's going to be reading there alongside some local writers, and she's here now to share more poetry. This is really nice.
Yes.
Thank you.
This next poem is somewhat of an emotional poem for me. It's called Stormy, a Lead Dog, or as anybody who's mushed dogs, and I expect some of our listeners may have, you know how important a lead dog is. Well, when you were out on a trap line for days and days, lead dog became very, very important for survival.
Yeah.
Because it often one would depend on the lead dog to get the direction, to have the right instinct to act. Everything from knowing where the overflow was probably dangerous. Overflow meaning the place where water comes up in a creek or stream, and sometimes has unstable ice. So there are a couple of terms. There's one that is a reference that people use when they're talking about female dogs a lot. It's not meant to be derogatory by any means, but I use it because it was what was used. And so just a warning there. And then there's, I reference a mystical place called, what the Irish call She. And that's where the fairy folk live, usually under hills. And it's also, I find in indigenous legends, there's references to the little people who live in the land or on the land. Okay, Stormy, a lead dog. A Malamute mix. Oh, let me start again. Let me also preface. This is the poem that I was reading to my father as he passed away. And he actually made his transition before I finished reading. But a friend said, keep reading. He's still listening. And it's helping him. So I just thought I would bring that up to remind people poetry can be very powerful.
Yeah.
Stormy, a lead dog. A Malamute mix. Ears flopped at half-mast, held snug against her head in perpetual wariness. A mantle of coarse black hair and white eye patches like clamps. She carried a Gold Rush pedigree, a blend of any breed of dog able to pull a heavy sled across terrain, tricky with snags or overflow, boiled up through cracks in the ice along creeks and lakes in cold no one of sane mind would tackle. My father's lead dog, Stormy, was of sane mind. She began each journey stock still in harness, head lowered toward the ground, often hunkered down on her belly. My father hitched up the other dogs who leapt and jerked on the tow lines for a week-long trek to check traps set out in swampy woods across the lake, away from cubbies snug with hay and racks stacked with frozen fish. Off into the winter twilight, a short way out on the lake, home still in sight, Stormy would yelp, then wail in misery, slow the pace, let the other dogs bunch up and brawl. Then came the limp on a right foot. As curses ripped into her cupped ears, the limp shifted left before it vanished. When my father recounted his trips, my tender ears knew this dog as that dirty bitch. One day, he hooked her up to a small sled and let me drive my first team of one. Stormy hauled me down the road while my father watched from the porch, but as soon as the door closed, she stopped. No matter how much I pushed the sled against her or screamed and pummeled her with little fists, she stood and gazed at me with dark, morose eyes, all the more sad when I sank onto my knees, weeping. Stormy was a lead dog, not a playmate. She went on to whelp the team that ferried my father into the wild, all with erect ears, except Cinco. Big, affable Cinco, born in the large litter on Cinco de Mayo, with her black and white markings, but ears fully drooped. He pulled in the wheel, closest to the sled, willing to please anyone but another male dog. Once across the lake, Stormy resigned to work, obeyed G and Ha, held the tow line straight, keeping 6 dogs moving at a steady clip, all eager to reach camp, burrow into snow, and cover their noses with tails as darkness fell toward 60 below. When the ice fog altered the landscape into an Arctic she and erased the trail, Stormy led them back into known territory. Only in this extreme world did my father grant his dog undisputed reign. But Stormy never took to the place beyond the snowy peaks, where street and store knot up the wild, and sled dogs are culled for the thinnest, leggiest to race on groomed trails with checkpoints. Stormy succumbed along with Cinco and all but one daughter to a virus that sped through their lungs and brought these giants down. At an age critical of my father, I startled to see his eyes tender to tears as he urged his dog to hang on. But she shut down with a way of life we chanced to walk. Not even the stubborn heart of Stormy could hold back unrelenting change to a body or a land or the mind of man. But every so often, in the many litters that graced my father's home, a pup arrived with ears that hugged the head and never quite stood up.
Stormy. Nice one. Yeah. That one needs the time. Like, there's a whole mix of poems in here, long ones, short ones. This would be, in the longer range, but that's nice to really let that one play out like that, get his little story.
Yeah.
And that idea of like, that's how, the spirit lives on, right? In their pups, right? And his ears that flop down. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was loaded. This idea of, there's dog racing and mushing, but, dog teams were relied on life and death, or for checking trap lines or traveling. And you could see like the racing, sure, it could get pretty heavy, but it's probably pretty fun compared to survival, or, when it's real, more serious.
When the snow goes, as they call the snowmobiles, when they were, I guess there's still some that are called snow goes. I'm not sure of the different types, but when they first came out, they broke down a lot, and people would say that it was in a lot of ways more dangerous than having a dog team, because sometimes you'd be quite miles from the village or where you lived, and you'd have to walk and hope you made it.
Yeah. There's a good metaphor there with like, the old fashioned way and versus like technology as we go, like you can't rely on these things, but like your dog team, even if one dog has a problem, well, the team, can carry it through, you're going to.
Yeah. We sometimes sacrifice efficiency for reliability.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
That reliability is a nice feeling, to have, right? That safety in that.
In this country, I think so.
Yeah. I like that line, a lot of it just gave me a comfort. Swampy went across like away from cubbies, snug with hay and rack stacked with frozen fish. Like they love that, right? To be back home after running and be all cozy, and I don't know. That just makes me feel cozy, that image. But they want to be out there on the land and traveling, and
Yeah. Well, Stormy was just a whole different personality. She definitely was. What made her a good lead dog also made her very reluctant to get going.
Yeah, right. She's out there kind of baying and
Yeah. The dogs we have known.
Yeah, a lot of great dog poems in here, I should add. That one about Juno, your dog, super powerful.
Yeah.
Just like, kid loving a dog and then
losing it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Where do you want to go from here?
Well, I thought we'd get a little closer to kind of jump really to Anchorage, and the fact that we moved there. I could read a poem about that move, and then get into my chapbook about my father that I wrote in memory of him following his death. And I can read a couple poems there.
Yeah.
Probably in with a family gathers for dinner. How are we doing on?
We're good on time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a fairly short. It's called Crossing Over Mount McKinley, which is what we still called Mount Denali then. It was after we had moved to Anchorage, and probably after I graduated from East Anchorage High School in 1964, that people began to propose Mount Denali was more appropriate and in keeping with the indigenous naming that which I agree with. But I also have this, when I'm writing about the past, to use the terms and name place names that were used then.
Yeah. It's all part of this real consistent, feel I got from the whole book. You really enter this book, and, I was gripped, and you can Stay in it till the end.
Okay. At this time, I am, as I mentioned earlier, approaching 11,
Okay.
crossing over Mount McKinley. The family loads last, walks up the ramp into the belly of a C-130. Crammed with dogs, a freight sled, their boxes labeled, pots and pans. This child carries a book. At the part where the mother grieves the death of her children, stricken by diphtheria. During the liftoff, the seatbelt cuts into her thighs. She does not read or speak, but peers out the window as the growl of the engine erases all words, enwraps her in a hum of silence. The lake, fringed with birches, threading their last gold leaf through black spruce, shines a moment in the weakened light of overcast spread across a September afternoon before the aircraft banks to the southeast and the lake recedes. As the plane scrapes close to earth, heaved up 20,000 feet, the girl enters a view she has known all her life from a bedroom window. She gazes upon the highest point of the continent, now subdued by clouds. Her childhood reduced to icy combs of glaciers and snowfields that fall off bare rock. And then the mountain fades.
Nice. That's you leaving.
That was leaving.
The lake recedes, the mountain fades.
And then my folks lived in Anchorage, nearly 60 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And when my father passed away, then the old home in Anchorage, which at the time we moved there in 1957 was, as they used to say, out in the boondocks. Anchorage had grown up around it, so it became East Anchorage. So this chapbook, Smoke Lifts, actually I published it, or my good friend Fred Dodsworth in Berkeley. And if he's listening, thank you, Fred, specifically for helping me pull together this little booklet right after my father passed away. Smoke Lifts. And this is me that at that time, on the cover. And I wasn't going to do that, but something in that poem sparked me to read the first poem, which is also short.
Yeah.
And then I will get into some of the leave taking. That which sings. And the epigraph here is, this shaking keeps me steady. Theodore Redke. I behold the rock and let it hold me, and I sway against the writing of the rock, the body wrapped up in bark. One breath at a time shapes the keynote, unfurls the wind, sets off the birches. I'll come back to that. actually, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to remind listeners that we thank you for listening here live on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. If you're here for the Poetry Festival or just tuning in, we appreciate it. Sandra Wassilie is here as the featured poet of the first annual Seward Poetry Festival that local poet Shauna Pataki has built and is putting on. We're kicking it off. We got a lot of events this weekend. And here we are at the station, which is always fun. But I don't know, kind of extra special, I think, today with so Sewardite, who's returned to Seward, and with the poetry festival. And I don't know, I'm just feeling it. They're all really fun. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. It's nice when people visit. It means a lot to us and to me. And yeah. Have fun. I know.
Yeah, and right here in Seward. Oh, I hope that my work is reaching people and giving them some meaning and maybe some understanding of this person that lived here for 28 years.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot out of it, and people will. There will be listeners, and yeah.
Okay, actually, I'm going to read this poem now, and then maybe a couple others that follow.
Okay.
It's called "A Family Gathers for Dinner."
I like that title.
Yes, and actually, I did drive up from Seward. I was living in Seward at the time that this particular dinner did happen, and it's really for that particular moment with my father. He's well, I'll just read it. Family gathers for dinner. I arrived first, the firstborn, a guest at the house once home, my father's house now. An August rain shakes the trees. Birch litter the pond with and seed, choke the dolphin fountains dry. And from pins in the backyard, Siberians yap at attention to the intrusion. As I enter the hall, an amber odor accosts me, and from the wall, black eyes snap on fire in my mother's portrait. In the kitchen, her grandson slams down a pot. The drive to dominate skips a generation and boils over on the stove. Hauling plastic platters of finger food, my father trails the bevy of brothers and wives, leaves the front door ajar. The grand chef, now slicing tomato, certain his younger brother is the culprit, growls under his breath to no one. His sibling mutters back to whoever will listen. Scotch swirls through greetings. Marinade sizzles on coals, grilling salmon. TVs blare the news from 3 rooms. Airplane crash in Western Alaska. Senator Stevens aboard, status unknown. 2 dogs escape outdoor captivity. Storm the living room through the door never quite closed. Track in rain-soaked earth and canvas for food. One lifts his leg on the sideboard, handcrafted out of thick walnut, real wood. My mother's daughter, I offer. The dogs are ruining the house. My father replies, they live here. In the glow of spirits, chewed up sofas and urine-stained floors, real oak begin to look antique. I glance at the Monet suspended above the fray, a late purchase she made from the confinement of wheelchair. The blur of lilies in rain light flatter upon not assailed by dogs. I go to say goodnight when my father slumps in his chair over a crossword, pencil dangling loose, near a glass drained to melting ice cubes. The alpha bitch stretches out on his bed against the wall hung with paintings of dogs, generations of huskies, my mother disciplined with tidbits at dinner. Each dog a point of recall in a constellation, the past distilled to an image, the present undecipherable tedium until its weight crushes or something crashes and I'm beaten back to earth, reduced to leaf and seed, to what remains caught in my throat, gathered back to first memories, family, the first mystery.
Nice. That one's awesome. I mean, I'm enjoying it all, but I'm like, right, you got the cast of characters, you got the room, and just these little bits that we can go on Thanksgiving. And so you take us somewhere personal for us by writing personally. And you said this happened. A lot of your poems happened, right?
Yeah,
in the dream that is childhood. That's like your process, at least in what that book.
Some little moment that I remember.
Yeah, and you kind of work off it, but there is a lot of truth and like like your book is called a memoir and nonfiction. I just think that's so interesting, and just with this show, we try to reach like new writers and like how do you find writing? Like where do you source it? What do you pull from? And so your life and. I wonder with that poem, like how close to that event did you write the poem? Was this like looking back at it, or was this kind of like okay? With the Stephen, the news report on the plane crash, almost seems like there's something.
It was. It wasn't. It was. It was. It was fairly. It was probably within a year or two, for sure.
Yeah, like that night, or you like? I'm gonna write about this night.
No, I usually need some distance from events. Once in a while, I'll write down a few lines from something somebody has said.
Yeah.
But generally, I kind of need that reflection and process. It's just part of a little distancing to know.
Right.
It was easy to feel kind of exasperated with my father, but then when I think back on it, then I think, I think often a lot of behavior stems from some kind of either a good intention or pain. So I think a lot of my poetry stems from pain that I sense in others or in myself. And it's okay. What is that pain teaching us? What is it showing us?
Yeah.
And I think that's pain helps us. Writing about pain helps us find the gift. Its gift, and it's hard in some situations, like when you're dealing with rheumatoid arthritis, like when in our family. Then it's hard to see where the gift is.
Yeah.
But my mother died from complications of rheumatoid arthritis, and she was beginning to age too. My sons have it, and they converted into being stewards of the earth and food sovereignty. I convert that pain into something that provides us with hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pain to hope.
Yeah.
I think of like appreciation, like pain can kind of do that, right? Like,
yeah.
It's relative. Like when you're having a day that has less pain, you appreciate it. You're grateful for that.
But it takes some time to contemplate on it and think what's going on here.
Yeah. And I imagine your experience with your pain and people, close to you, their pain, like it's each gift they're all different as far as what's found when you really do that deep look.
Yeah.
Well, that's a valuable thing about that writing can do right there, you know. I'm
Yes.
sure.
I think you can write about what's really bugging you
Yeah, yeah.
immediately. But then some things need time.
Yeah, yeah,
And sometimes you write about something that's bugging you, and it's good to do that, and you don't really quite capture it. But then you come back maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years later
right.
and read it. Oh, that's
Yeah.
what that's about.
Yeah.
So don't throw away your old poems if it didn't make sense to you.
Yeah. But just that having written it, that's a step, you know, and now you've got that piece where you've looked at it a few ways, you've tried to get it down as accurate, as poetic, as raw, what have you, whatever is motivating you that day. And then it's changed a little when you've brought the writing lens to it, right? And that thought and that emotion.
Right.
And then you can think about it a new way, you know, now that you've made something from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. I don't know, I think of some poems in The Dream That Is Childhood, you know, Rabbit's Foot was a super powerful one for me. I mean, I know you probably don't want to.
I don't think I'm going to read that one.
You should get this book, Cirque Press, you know, all their books are online. Or I know this book is actually here in Seward at quite a few shops as well. But The Dream That Is Childhood, a memoir in verse by Sandra Wassilie it's poignant, and it's, you know, to hear stories of her trapping as a young girl and just, you know, how, I mean, the life and death you deal with and the problems that need attention right then and there to relieve pain, you know, and, and you write about it so eloquently. I think of The Fox, which I've heard you read before, and she's going to be reading more this weekend, so you could maybe hear her read these. But
yes, given that the Saturday event will have student readers, I think I'm going to focus a little more on the younger, a little bit. I may read The Fox.
Yeah.
But a little more on making friends, because there weren't too many kids around when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But I did go into Fairbanks summers, and there were friends that came out to the lake. And,
there's some good poems about that.
And we had some antics.
Whoever was there was you know, a lot of effort going into making friends, and that's one of these universal things, you know, that's whatever the ways you make friends might be a little different now, and now with just, you know, certainly as you get older and how you keep in touch, but making friends, you know, remains as important as ever, as far as like what we're driven to do, you know, as kids, to connect and to have fun and to, you know, I think that'd be great to read.
To have. I think this is an advantage. Kids growing up in Alaska have the opportunity to get out and explore with each other kids on their own, and find out what their parents are warning them about is true. Don't go near that riverbank.
Right.
You might fall in.
They get to understand, like, you know, the old-fashioned dangers that, you know, early people have dealt with, cold and, you know, mountains and wildlife.
And they learn to for themselves how much risk they can take. I think that's important. I'm not sure that all kids are getting that kind of upbringing. Their lives are very sheltered, if you will.
Indoor screens coming in more.
Indoor with the screens, being close to the screen, or their life very structured, supervised. Not that that's
at play. What are we going to do today? It's good to know that that's still available here in lots of places, but we are lucky in that sense. Well,
was there anything in particular you were looking for me to read?
This is wonderful. I mean, I mentioned those poems. I want to find that other one. I want to hear about what you're working on now. You know, you mentioned a novel that you're coming to. So why don't you think about that a little bit, like coming to the end on, and then more poetry about to, you know, as we finish break up here in Alaska, getting ready to through there as well. I want to read this lovely piece that I think I just really enjoyed. It just, you've talked about just giving thanks to animals. Well, let's read it. I just really like this as you can listen and get ready for kind of our final set here, talking about your work ahead and then talking about the Poetry Festival a little more. This is from Checking Nets. It's just the last paragraph. There's just this line I love, and then the whole paragraph. This would be more of like Sandra has a lot of these prose poems, I guess they could be called, where they're whole sentences in like a paragraph form. The words can really just like you're telling a story, or and then often they'll be followed with like a real short one. Whole variety. You really get a lot in this book. So I keep myself hunched up small against the quickening of mosquitoes that find us in the middle of the expanse, and against the leeches crawling in slime laced with blood oozed out of nicked fish flesh. Enclosed by the cramped space on a craft floating over darkness, I wonder if the fish ever saw the nets, entanglements from which they seldom wriggled free. Did they mistake the brush of mesh for the caress of water weeds, puzzled that safety ensnared them with such certainty? Sending with a question, I mean, that line, the slime laced with blood oozed out of nicked fish flesh, just lovely sound there. I don't even care what the words say. It's just beautiful. And then they say a lot. And then this idea of going in the fish's, mind or what have you, they're feeling like taking it there. Like, what does the fish think? I just think, I don't know. I like that. I think that gets at like, these are beings. These are, each fish, fish are often like a school of fish in a group. And to just, I don't know, that paragraph was like so much in this. I marked a lot. So much really moved me. And then this one, if I could find, but I love that poem where you're like talking about your mom and dad who come through in this book quite a bit as just really interesting people. Of course, you guys lived a really interesting life those 9 years on Lake. But that poem where you're like the messenger, like
the emissary,
where
your
mom's
that one's
telling
a fun
you to go,
one.
yeah,
I should read it.
Let's
Let's read that one because it's
it's
a little lighter in some ways.
And I think it gets at them.
It's heavy and it's light.
Yeah,
too.
it made me laugh. And that's nice when you have heavy things, to kind of lighten it. It's balanced.
Okay, I think that's in Becoming Family. Yeah, section. Okay. Are you ready for me to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
When you're ready, yeah.
Okay, it's on page 69.
Yep, I'm with you.
The emissary. She would send me when I was too young to disobey. Tell your father I want to see him. Besides, I'm eager to escape. Her tear-stained face and younger siblings rattled by a slammed door, each of us cowering. What would cause such fury? Each scanning recent misdeeds for clues. Did I have something to do with it? Outside, the mosquitoes seemed tolerable. I find my dad maybe down at the lake fixing the outboard motor, or at the airfield tinkering with the plane, something always in need of repair. I deliver Mom's message. Tell her I'm busy. Back I walk the tightrope of tension. Tell him to come now. I imagine I am a scout in buckskins returning once more to enemy camp. With one hand on the reins of a spotted horse, the other held up to show I bear no firearms. He shoots me anyway. God damn it, tell your mother I'll come when I'm damn well ready to come. I consider the delicacy of my situation and take my time leading my horse back. I feign cheer when I tell Mom. He became a pretty good facilitator at times in my life.
Got some practice.
Yep, they're strong.
Yeah.
Well, should I finish up with a couple of poems?
Sure. Yeah. Or you are working on a novel, right?
Oh,
you
that
wanna-
novel.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I got a couple of projects going, and one of them needs to get off the burner so I can concentrate on the other. Uh, the novel takes place in the late 60s, early 70s, and I really haven't developed a good what they call an elevator pitch.
Yeah, Those are tough.
Yeah, but I guess I could
Do some
say
practice.
it's about a marriage that has started and ended due to influences of both family and the social political movements during the Vietnam era.
Okay.
And it involves very much, the characters involve more your, what I would call more the bulk of us in our generation that went through those times. We weren't the movers and shakers in the movements. All of us were affected in some way by the Vietnam War, either by going and fighting it or avoiding fighting it. And if you had a boyfriend who involved in either, you were involved as a woman.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
so it's in some ways it is somewhat autobiographical. I was a serious student during that time in the sciences. Um, I I married a man who was very involved in his anthropological music, ethnomusicology. But these characters are a little different. They're involved in different things, but they are those who did want to get their degrees and they did want to go on with their lives, but things just got upended.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes place, a good third of the novel takes place in India, where
Wow.
the husband in the novel goes to do his research, and then his wife joins him.
Uh-huh.
He's I include some of the background on their parents and grandparents because I do think families do influence us in a lot of ways in the decisions that we make. And I also wanted to get that sub-theme about the restlessness that the American spirit has.
Mm.
We've epitomized it in that go west, go west.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's no place to go west anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
Go.
but we still kind of move around
Yeah.
a lot. We get restless and move.
Yeah.
Never quite happy where we're at. And there have been some significant displacements in our history. And I think World War II was one of those influences. And I'm trying to. It's a sub theme, but
Mm-hmm. Part of it takes place in Alaska.
no.
California.
It's a California and Minnesota and India.
Okay. Cool. I like books that move around. You get to go to a few different places. That's nice. In India, that's pretty neat.
It's called The Recesses, and it's trying to get into those places that talking about the places, and it is cross-cultural too, dealing with
The Recesses.
and I
Good
bring
title.
in Ojibwe. It's a culture I'm not as familiar with, but I've known a lot of Minnesotans in Alaska, and I feel like part of me has lived there too.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I've had some people from Minnesota read that part of the novel, and they say, "Boy, you got the jargon down."
Nice. That's a big compliment. Yeah, that's great. That can add a lot to a book.
Yeah. So that's what I'm working on. I'm in the fourth draft, so I'm getting it ready to.
It's close to being.
Getting it out to readers and getting it out to a substantive editor who can tell me
Right.
Yeah, okay, you're getting into too many. There's too much interior thinking here, or whatever.
Maybe they'll say, "This is awesome. I'm so
I
glad
don't
to have
know.
this.
I
Let's
don't know.
find an agent."
But I feel like it's getting some, as I finish up the last two chapters in this particular draft, that it has a good integrity. But it takes, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it takes a lot of time writing a novel.
Yeah.
And when you're doing the rest of your life too.
Right. Yeah, it's nice to just have the novel and less of the rest of your life going on, where you can just live in it. For the novel's sake, not necessarily, and maybe for your life too at the time. But yeah, well, that sounds like a really book. That sounds like a really loaded novel, like great themes going on. That was a pretty good elevator speech, I think. I want to read
Okay.
this, and I think,
Okay.
I don't know, I'm seeing like this theme with your writing, and I think it's a good path of like, especially with poetry, but I see it here in the novel too, of like taking the personal stuff that is going to give you value to write just for the sake of writing it, for that talking about like finding the pain or whatever, like the therapy of writing or what have you, but like this, I need to write for me, but then you also bring like, this personal thing, I can also write in a way that really could find an audience, and that it could be universal and people can connect to because of what they've been through, or like, I think that's hard to do, but that's kind of the goal. And like, you're covering it. Sometimes when I write something, it's like, well, I'm always, I say myself, I'm like, well, I'm practicing, I'm getting better style. I'm getting better at writing. I'm like, well, what's this story going to do for somebody, or an audience, or even me sometimes. They're just pretty light and fun, my earlier stuff. But I feel like you're covered with like, well, writing is doing stuff for you, as far as like your life, and like, these are your stories. These are your people, and so writing about personal is always so valuable, but then to be able to take that step, this is what the good ones do. And I think you're in this category of like taking the personal and presenting it in a way that's universal, and just like hitting where people can bring their own personal into your stories, like the family gathering story, I think is a good example. And it sounds like the Recesses, has that too, where you're taking, with fiction, we use what we know, and like you can use aspects of your life, and you
have to.
But maybe, I don't know. Is that?
That sounds good. So I tell people, they say, well, Sonia is the main character, and Thomas is pretty major too. But is this autobiographical? And I'm thinking, well, there's bits of me in Sonia and in Thomas.
Right. Yeah.
I have that certain drive that Thomas has that drives people crazy sometimes. But
I do that with characters. Like I separate the parts of myself, or the parts of myself that could expand. I just have like a little piece of that, but then you can really, let it fruit in a character, which can be a really just, fun thing to do.
Yeah.
That's nice to hear you. You do it. You got poetry, novel, love it. And then more poetry coming after.
More poetry is, I got another manuscript that has been in progress for a number of years too. I actually started when I was working on my master's in fine arts on creative writing. And that's about going back into my California background and talking about the people that came to California in beginning in 1949. Some of them, like my great grandmother, may have come from earlier, but how they came together and have formed this family, and what part they played in the history of developing California. So it's there's the physical birth, and then there's the
I like that. I had never heard that. That's
the
a
spiritual mental growth or birth, I think.
Awareness.
Happens. Yeah, that's from, and I when I first heard that expression from Yupik's thinking about the world, I thought that it makes so much sense to me. Where I first became aware.
Right. Yeah.
So
that goes with memory, maybe a little bit, or just before. Probably, you always hear like, "What's your first memory?" Like, do you think those are linked a bit? Certainly could.
There's certainly bonding that happens right from the get-go that is deep, what I would call deep memory.
Yeah.
but that becoming aware of the world and who you are and where you are, and your sense of it can come. But there's certainly that mother, and of course, by 5 months, a kid is beginning to relate to the world. And,
Yeah. That's before awareness, well before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And beginning to recognize people like dad and
Right. Yeah. Sibling.
So yeah, that whole process is it's we still I think the jury's out on how that works. I find some of the work I'm reading on adoptees and some of the work that they are presenting through poetry mostly, but also prose, that there's awareness of even especially for reading people who've been adopted out of country, out of their original culture into which they were born. And there seems to be an awareness that happens that we don't even have words for.
Yeah.
So poetry's good for that. Poetry's good at presenting things that don't always have words.
Right. Yeah. Well put. Yeah, you're in a good spot when you're trying to find words for something that doesn't have words.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And even if you likely will fail, I think, right? If it doesn't have words just by logic, but what you write will be valuable. I think it's a good mountain to climb.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been wonderful, Sandra.
Well, thank you.
Catching up with you and hearing you read. So, it really adds a lot to hear you, move through the poems. It always is to hear a poet, that's the whole experience, to hear, especially personal things. So that's been a treat. And I want to go over just the poetry schedule for the weekend once more. If you want to find one more poem to finish on, and then I'll do, or if you'd rather not, then we can just kind of say goodbye. But that can be kind of fun to kind of close with a poem.
Okay. I'll find you. Good.
Yeah, so Sandra Wassilie has been here at the studio, 91.7 KIBH FM Seward, live on the radio, live on YouTube on our at Sacktown channel. You can rewatch it at the at Sacktown channel and share it with listeners who maybe missed the live version. But this is a kickoff of sorts to the Poetry Festival here in Seward. Seward Poetry Festival, brought to you by Shauna Pataki, Seward Writers Collective, but Shauna Pataki is the builder here, and she's brought a lot of energy to the weekend here. We got poem stickers on coffee cups at Res Art, and tomorrow there is a meet and greet at Primrose Provisions, I think in the afternoon. This flyer is up though. Sandra will be there as well as other writers. So if you just want to kind of talk with some writers and have a nice time at Primrose Provision, which it always is at that beautiful location, that's tomorrow. And then there is yoga, Seward Yoga with Debbie Jean, Poses and Prose. That's Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Dreamland Books, new bookstore, Dreamland Books and Yarn here in Seward, right downtown, opens officially on Saturday. Very excited for that. And also Saturday, 2:00 is the poetry reading at the library. Sandra will be reading some things that she didn't read here today, maybe some repeats, but she'll be a featured reader there. We're going to have students from Seward Elementary and possibly Seward Middle School reading their work to open the show right there at 2. And then there's a list of local readers as well who will be sharing their words. And then finally on Sunday, I love that there's a Sunday. It's like the brunch after the wedding. One more thing. We don't want to say goodbye just yet. There's so much energy, right? You can that can be the time to make plans on what to do with this energy, as far as boy, that was great, seeing you read, and, people are going to be able to socialize, several times here. But then Sundays out at Miller's Landing at 10 a.m. Shauna Pataki will be leading Rise and Write. So probably be some writing prompts, I imagine, but just kind of one more writing gathering, and that was a great place for us to gather in the past. Really nice out there. So we're really covering town, going to lots of places and bringing poetry to Seward, which is awesome. The festival is here.
Yeah,
here and be able to talk with them, and so
Those writing prompts sometimes are very productive. Sometimes you think, oh, I don't know.
Right.
And you start writing, and then you find
Right.
it digs into you, and there's something that was needed to
Yeah.
stimulate you to get something out.
Yeah. I've
So-
turned my day around. But any way you can do
or
it.
maybe you have a long to-do list, and you think, oh, I'll do that first.
Yeah. Yeah. So prompts, just a way to get started. But no, you can find an entry into more writing, or even just write a little gem right there that you can share with someone, or just keep to yourself and just know, hey, that wasn't here a moment ago before I was given that word or this picture to get things going. And yeah, something you're wanting to write or needs to be written comes through, or just maybe something random that's just kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't you take us away with one more poem? When you finish the poem, I am going to close the show. So I'll just say thanks to our listeners. Really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you out and about at the Poetry Festival this weekend. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And this will be a very short poem, but how appropriate to read this one. What endures? Matter, lifted by spirit, feels the pull to return to the earth it abandoned. This flesh holds its water, its appetites hunting beyond the gravity of skin. What endures longer? The letters the hand engraves on marble, the sound. What about the seed that the ripple of smile as water finds it?